Hello, everybody. Welcome again to our conference, to this final plenary session. I'm really glad to have you here to listen to our chairs and discussant about the discussion that have been carried on in the parallel session. I think that there were very good discussion and paper that were presented, so it will be very interesting for us to hear from the different session what has been discussed, and then we will have the possibility to have a round of opinions about how to put together all what we have learned in these 2 days of conference for improving our project, but also for leaving something for our future research. I would like to thank all the participants, again, Elisa and Giulia for their organization, our chairs and discussant for their presence and coordination of the different sessions. And I would leave immediately the floor to the session about social lighting and lighting technology for urban well-being. I presume Don is going to refer about the discussion in the session that was held yesterday.
I finally remembered to unmute myself, yes.
Hi, Don.
I was doing that all day yesterday. I've got a slide I can show if you want, just so that people have something to look at other than me. Can you see it?
It's coming slowly, but yes, we can see it. Okay.
I just thought it'd be nice to put up a picture. This is a design by Elettra Bordenaro, and it's a community engagement project we're doing in Southwark. So it's a piece of social lighting on a council estate in South London. And it's just a nice backdrop, I think, to have to this kind of discussion. And let me find my notes. Yeah, I mean, this session was on social lighting and lighting technology for urban well-being. That was the title. Light as an intervention in social lives and social spaces. So really, how do we connect up different kinds of social and technical knowledges, design, technology, and governance came into a fair amount of this. So there's really big questions, and it was a really engaged and interesting conversation, I have to say. 3 hours, pretty intense 3 hours, which also makes it a bit hard to summarize or pick out discrete points. So I'm picking out the stuff, I'm taking chair's privilege and picking out the stuff which kind of stuck in my memory. One, to start with a negative, quite a few papers and some of the discussion really revolved around a pretty clear agreement on how little we know about light and well-being in actual social world. So a bit of a plug for our program. I mean, there was a sense that, yeah, this is the kind of work that really needs to be done. Several papers had literature reviews or reviews of expert opinions. And there's a sense, for example, that an awful lot of the research there is on indoor or experimental settings. So a lot of the focus both on the public realm and the connection between public and indoor is a real blank spot in our knowledge of just what lighting does to people and to social interactions. There was another kind of sub-theme there, which I think is really important for us, about the state of public understanding of light and lighting. That's to say, what do people know? What issues about light and lighting get topicalized? And also, what about flows of misinformation about light and lighting? So what kinds of public engagements with light are we actually contributing to by doing a project like this? Second thing, which is probably the topic we came back to again and again and again, and our a really helpful discussion, Mikhail Bielak. We ended with a strong focus on the issues of methodology and measurement. There, across the papers and across the discussion, and reflecting also the kind of internal state of our program, the multidisciplinary character of it, there's a huge diversity of methods that people are employing, and a real need to move between a range of different methods. And I think there's a general agreement on, yes, kind of methodological eclecticism is not just good, but crucial, but it's a really complicated thing. People had very different ideas of what one was measuring, how one was measuring, how you connected up measurements of, incredibly different things like economic analysis of light, of the impact of lighting interventions, versus virtual reality simulations of affective experiences of parks. I mean, how do you move between these kinds of methodologies and the kinds of representations of the world that come out of them? Clear need, and going very much back to Lucy Kimball's plenary talk, a real need for, and a real appetite for methodological creativity and experimentation, and maybe to be ever more adventurous about how we actually deal with these complicated issues. And I've got to signal a very classical sociological question, which I think kept coming up, which is the difference between observing behaviors, like how many people are moving across a particular space, as opposed to understanding what people are doing in that space. And obviously both are needed, but two people can be walking in relation to the light and yet be doing entirely different things, even though they're following the same footsteps. So again, it goes back to these questions of methodology and measurement. What do our kinds of views of the spaces we're working in amount to? Two more points. I think there was a real ongoing concern, which is really important for the program, with dealing with a very wide variety of properties of light. We all know that lighting has often been confined to, is it bright or is it dim? Is it there or is it absent? Whereas particularly in relation to, for example, older populations, visually diverse populations, neurodiverse, younger people, all kinds of populations, different properties are going to be important and have different kinds of impacts on them. So there's a real, for the project, and certainly for example, our actual lighting interventions, we need to have a much finer focus on the connections between different groups and what they experience. For example, there was a lot of, excellent work on young women at night, and how do you connect up a woman's experience walking down the street with actual properties of light in relation to what's going on there. So it involves quite fine attention to particular people in relation to particular properties of light. The focus on the complexity of light also obviously ties into the complexity of social worlds that we're intervening in. And I think, again, one issue which came up in a number of papers or in conversation about them was how do we deal with the kinds of outputs of our project. That's to say, one version of an output for lighting in relation to governance is the idea of a standard. But if we're dealing with complex material in relation to very diverse populations, is a standard based on the fiction of an average person or a normal person the best way to go? So, we certainly always talk about guidelines. But again, we need to think about just what is a guideline in relation to complex urban populations. I think those are Mikhail might want to throw in if you had anything else that you felt should be in a report back, but I think those are the things that kind of really stood out to me. It was a very rich conversation, I have to say. It was really lovely. Good.
Thank you very much, Don. I think you touched some of the key points we are dealing with in the project. So the knowledge, lack of knowledge in some fields, and connecting things together, awareness raising also is one of our aim. And the interdisciplinary approach from the beginning, also when we were writing the proposal, we were trying to understand each other, because it is really one of the key issues that we have to face, how to put together different perspectives, approaches, methods, and languages and words that we are using in trying to find something that is really keeping together all the different needs and aspects without losing the details. So we need to put together, but not to be too general or too cloudy then, so too foggy. So thank you very much. I'm also happy to hear that the discussion was so rich. So I think that this will help us a lot in defining our next steps in the project, and we will be able then to hopefully to provide some answers to the questions that have been raised during the session. I would go to the following session, and then I would also invite every discussant or chair also to comment on the other sessions, so that we can also try to contribute to this need to put together different perspectives and approaches. The second session we are now dealing with is artificial lighting and its implication for health, well-being, and circadian rhythm. Chiara and Dan probably are here for, I don't know who is going to make a short presentation.
We will do both, because we shared also the discussion for the presentation. Perfect. Okay, so I will go with this, just a few 2 slides. So this is the session, and there were some presentation on biomarkers of melanopsin retinal ganglion cells function in relation to light and circadian rhythms. And then there is another section on the impact of light and calculation tools about light intervention also. So the first 2 presentations were focused on the multi-layered approach to investigate the impact of light on health and disease. And in particular, me and Martina, we were presenting our study on the evaluation of melanopsin retinal ganglion cells that we know are very relevant for circadian photoentrainment in Alzheimer's disease, which is a disease characterized by circadian dysfunction. And we focused on this multi-layered approach, which is based on the use of CT, evaluating the optic nerve, but also actigraphic recordings for the rest activity rhythm, the chromatic pupillometry for evaluating the pupil response, as we know that melanopsin cells are relevant also for pupil response regulation. And we used also brain functional MRI to assess the occipital cortex response to light activation. And the last part was about genetic studies, including a panel of 84 clock genes, and we evaluated the association of these genes with Alzheimer's disease as well. But this is just a frame, and potential we can use this multi-layered approach to look at the impact of light as well, but also to assess the functionality of the melanopsin system. And we presented this new tool, which is the chromatic pupillometry, which is an easy and in vivo tool that we can use for controls and patients to assess the functionality of the melanopsin cells. And based on these results that we presented, we proposed the use of melanopsin cells as a marker of circadian dysfunction in many neurodegenerative disorders and also as a biomarker for conversion from MCI to Alzheimer, for example. But these, as I said, these tools can be easily applied also to other situations, and we discussed in the meeting, in the session, also the relevance to look for the project at the cognitive function of the people enrolled for the project, since we know that the circadian dysfunction is very relevant also for cognitive function. And with this, I think it's enough. I hope so.
Great, thank you. So I'll take over from there. So in the second half of the session, I don't have any beautiful slides, so it's just me you're looking at, unfortunately. But in the second half of the session, we had some really lovely contributions about what is good light and how does good light affect physiology and the human being in a more general sense. So Jan Denneman from the Good Light Group presented their view that good light is, and I'll read this out, is attractive, but also dynamic, it's optimized, and it's personal. So that really set the bar for us in terms of thinking about what good light would be in the context of this project, of course. And we talked about that quite extensively. We talked about what is the role of well-being in this, for instance, but also what is the role for cognition, the role for the melatonin suppression, and the entrainment of the circadian system. So there were lots of wonderful inputs there, but then we kind of turned the discussion to what is relevant in all of these measures and all of this large body of knowledge in the current study. And we really just set out the question, what is the light intervention, what we believe is good in this particular case. And there actually the answers seem to be fairly straightforward, which is that the spectrum of the light is not the most important point here. It's really about the intensity of the light. And again, going with the guidance from the Good Light Group, everybody seems to agree that 1,000 lux of internal light, or of artificial light at the level of the eye would be very good. We discussed the timing of this a little bit. So should it be early in the morning? And it shouldn't be really early in the morning, also given the circadian system in older adults, which is slightly less strong and has slightly different characteristics than younger adults. But it should definitely be before noon. So 2 to 4 hours before noon at 1,000 lux. We had some further discussions about what kind of measures we would be interested in, and as Chiara just already indicated, we're really interested in asking some questions about cognition. We're asking some questions about general well-being, and of course we have the actigraphy, and we'll have some of the genetic information to go with the participants as well. So we also identified, I guess as scientists do immediately, that of course this project would also throw up new questions that we could potentially answer within subgroups of the people that we will recruit into the study. And that of course is also a very nice prospect to look forward to. One last point that we raised and discussed is that within circadian biology or chronobiology, we very often talk about social jet lag. So this is the difference in adults between weekdays and weekends, where we have very different types of sleep-wake patterns and timing. And we were wondering how relevant this was to the older population. And we actually agreed that it's not very sensible to ask the question of retired people of whether this is a work day or a free day, but that probably a much better question is, which is what Anne Langvreugd suggested in the very first point, to ask the question, did you have to set an alarm clock this morning or not? And we feel that that's very important in the interpretation of the actigraphy data and the other types of measures that we'll be taking. And so we're hoping to include that within the protocol. So I think that sums up the discussion that we had. So we had some really lovely input and really tried to apply that to the current project and see what we felt was important there and what we can leave for other times.
Thank you both. I think we just had a very good example of the complication of the difficulty of dealing with this topic from different perspectives, because it was really a different view from what Don was telling us before. And I think that this reflection, this suggestion of thinking about what is good light is really something that opens a huge discussion that probably has no one answer. I think that we should just acknowledge that we have different measures that can contribute together in a sort of articulated and mixed approach to the health and well-being of people. So instead of finding just one approach, what we should try to do is really to combine different solutions in different ways, so to maximize all the many benefits that we could really have from an integrated approach to this topic. So I think that we should really try to focus on this integrated approach, because otherwise we will just start to discuss about which one is the approach needed in some situation. And I think this is something that will not let us to find any useful solution. So I think that really our key points should be to work around this combination of solutions, approaches for indoor lighting, for outdoor lighting, so to maximize the benefits for health, physiology, and well-being, and social life and quality of life. Thank you very much for this presentation. I'm going, but then I will leave the floor also to Don again and to you again if you want to comment further. But now I would leave the floor to Mark for presenting the discussion in session 5, Urban Analytics and Innovative Urban Lighting Policies for Health and Well-being.
Yes, thank you very much. I think what you just said is extremely important. So thank you for saying that. Good afternoon to everyone. I want to start a small summary of our session. And yeah, really thanking those speakers, because they really contributed to our session, sometimes even from the middle of the night or 8 p.m. on a Friday evening. So thank you to them. And also thanking the audience that stayed tuned, because it wasn't easy all the time. There was a peak, I think, around 50 people in this session. So it was quite a nice audience, quite reactive also. And the title doesn't really say anything about our session. It was really a blend of two big different topics. The first that was kind of put together, but you'll see that it actually works well. The first topic we concentrated on was the innovative urban lighting, I think, concepts and measurements. And that was already touched upon by Don especially, but there were some further presentations, etc. So that's nice and complementary. The second was related to the gathering and analysis of data in the urban sphere, and that's really relevant for our project. Both topics are really relevant. And perhaps, yeah, to start on the first layer of those presentations, yeah, I think what really struck me, and I think we agreed with the co-discussant and my and the session chair, was that there's a diversity and a complexity of lighting itself, and there's so many parameters that need to be taken into consideration, and both the macro level of a city or the micro level. The qualitative and the quantitative aspects, they both go together. Lighting is such a science and an art. The objective and the subjective levels. And yeah, the 4 papers in this part of the session all had something to do with this complexity, and trying to unveil part of that, and also linked to the challenges of urban lighting. So we touched upon various things: the importance of ambience and vertical lighting in city centers, in correlation with the very much needed work on light pollution. So that's a complex one. How do we balance that? We talked about the opportunity that represents in many cities around the world renovating their urban lighting. So that's an opportunity for efficiency, for sustainability, but this also needs to be correlated with, how, well, what we called well-being, and especially safety and social security. So those can be sometimes, a bit some paradox here also. We talked about the importance of uniformity as a criteria, a key criteria for perceived safety on the one hand, but on the other hand, we also talked about uniformity being one of the aspects to take into account only. And especially if you widen the definition of what is safety and security, and especially if you widen the definition of lighting to non-visual effects. So uniformity is very important, but it's also, let's say, only one step to understanding perhaps, what is good light again. Anyway, and indeed here, I think psychological factors and deep layers of human nature come into play here for the definition of the feeling of safety. I mean, that's something we won't be able to focus to figure out just between us. It'll take a bit more time and a bit more people, but together, I think, as you said, Simona, we can maybe make some steps. Many speakers emphasized one thing is that contrast is a very important criteria of good lighting, definitely. And standards, that was already discussed, but we also said that standards, it's generally agreed that they cannot be the only way, to determine what is good lighting for the community. And that really needs to be involved. The community itself really needs to be involved. And if that's the case, they can co-produce, co-design perhaps the right policy where everybody might feel safe in the night. And from there, we also heard that digital tools and data can really be an asset to integrate more depth, more precision into the analysis of the impact of light, and how this, can really potentially be brought to scale in cities. However, digital tools are not magic, cannot be the only way. So always in combination with low tech, and we heard a little bit about torches, how they were important for community groups to focus on lighting, and the analog, community engagement tools. And this gives us kind of a natural transition to the second part of the this session. That was less focused on urban lighting itself, but more focused on how to collect, how to interpret the data for bringing benefits, added value, bringing better management of cities, and perhaps the urban life in general. And so we had three relatively technical contributions for this this part of the session. And the importance, so focused on three different things: the importance of daylight and daylighting to enhance very dense areas of cities. That was really interesting, I think. And how we can maximize the natural light. There was a big technical part of that presentation, but how to maximize the natural light in private homes. There was another presentation about gathering data from satellites for modeling, measuring, and monitoring air pollution. And there were the third presentation on gathering data from social media to analyze urban mood. That's really interesting. And these presentations, I think, really pointed out how we need to look for accurate data. So both on small scale, large scales. And that might be relevant to a lot of people in the ENLIGHTENme project. And of course, there were links, from daylighting to artificial lighting, from air pollution to light pollution. So there could be areas of exploration of how data is collected and used. And in the third presentation, something caught my attention really on the study of social media. That's really important, very exciting to imagine that we can explore, emotional well-being in a city. And, with the analysis of tweets, and that was really interesting. That might help to better understand a very specific target group. I think young people from 25 years old to 30 years old, quite a specific target group that don't really participate in wider urban discussions. So that's, I think, interesting. Okay, so in general, and to conclude that, what comes out is the fact that light is multifaceted. And now that's not a surprise, isn't it? It's a very wide topic to apprehend for a lot of people. And also this brings a difficulty to regulate and to find regulatory approaches to urban lighting. So yeah, of course, I think we need the recommendations and guidelines. Because urban lighting in itself has a public and a private content. So that's really hard. And what is more, we're actually focusing on Arab cities with people. So that's in itself very complicated. I don't know if that helps, but at least we can't be accused of oversimplifying. Also, some key questions for our projects came out of these discussions, and very well brought up by our session chair and in the discussions with our co-discussant here. How do we transfer this great, interesting new knowledge from the research? So that's clear, from the research to the design, and from the design to the practice, or directly from research to practice. But indeed, there's probably a gap here with research that's very innovative and perhaps sometimes a bit far from practice. At the same time, we also see that there's quite a lot of experimentation, whether it's live experimentation or digital experimentation, and that's reassuring. But at the same time, it's also, how do we scale up these experimentations? So it's not easy questions. And a second, perhaps, big question for us was all these presentations perhaps put a bit more understanding on the impact of light on well-being. But I think we still need to better understand well-being in relation to health. And that was probably addressed more in other sessions. So that's it, quite a complete wrap up. But yeah, I would really agree again with what you said, Simona. A comprehensive way of looking at things probably will enable us to go a bit further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Very interesting discussion you had in your session.
It was great.
And thank you for highlighting some aspects like the complexity of this topic, which is light, but also health and well-being. So we are dealing with many different complex topics all together. So the complexity is sort of exponentially raising, but also the need to take into account both objective and subjective aspects that is really relevant. But what I find also very interesting is something you said towards the end of your presentation about the need to understand how to translate research into practice or research into policy, which is really a key issue, because we have this problem of sort of understanding this complexity from the research point of view, but then there is another job to be done, which is to translate what we have understood in something that can be used by practitioners, by policymakers. So we really have in front of us some 3 years and something of hard work to be done before we have to understand this complexity, this comprehensive approach that we have to establish, but then we also have to translate it into something that can be used by practitioners and policymakers. Thank you again. I would now go to the last session, which is about ethical, legal, and social aspects of urban lighting and related health studies. Unfortunately, Deborah, who was the chair of the session, is not feeling well, so she cannot be here, but I think that someone from the session is here. Perhaps Chara or Elisabetta can say something about the discussion there.
Sure, I can. Thank you and good afternoon. I can just give a brief summary, but if you don't mind, I will I would share my screen so I can use the presentation, since I was not supposed to speak now. So if you don't mind, I will share my screen. Just 1 second. Okay, let me. I am able to. Okay. Are you seeing my screen, but not the presentation yet?
Yeah, still black.
Sorry, unfortunately, I think I have some problem with my.
Okay, we see the screen now, but it is just the desktop, not the presentation.
Okay.
Perhaps you have to. Okay.
Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Just a
Yeah.
presentation. Okay. Okay. Well, in our session, we try to discuss the ethical, legal, and social aspects of urban lighting, and these that you can see are the diverse areas to be investigated, and in which we try to discuss the role of the ethical, legal, and social aspects. These areas are also reflected in research questions that we try to discuss together in our sessions. And in particular, the study of health in relation to urban lighting poses some challenges for the extensive and intensive collection of data and biosamples and so on. And these challenges are especially relevant today inside the push for data bioavailability and open data strive and so on. So we try to discuss how to deal with human health data, to be able to use them efficiently and at the same time ensure privacy rights also to the people, to the research participants. And in this sense, the presentation by Andrea Parziale was focused on the issues of open data, but also data protection. Another question is how can we ensure that rights and responsibilities are distributed so that data subjects are protected in the best way. And that's why the role of data controller, data protection, or joint controllers are really important. And this topic, these issues has been analyzed by Kira Stanton. And we also try to understand how to conduct research in a responsible way. So the role of research integrity in enhancing the quality of research, and as well as in protecting fundamental rights. And we also discussed also the ethical discourse framing the urban lighting and how is light pollution situated within the justice discourse. And this the topic of the issue of justice was addressed by Mirko Ancilotti, who gives from this perspective interesting food for thoughts. And so we try to understand why are we discussing about fair data principles, accountability, responsibilities, and why about justice. And all these aspects are related to the concept of research integrity. So we try to also to understand why to care about research integrity, research ethics, and we try to answer to this question. We started from the question that you can see, because research integrity means conducting research in a way that allows others to have trust in the methods, in the findings of the research, and it is related to both the integrity of the conducted research and also professionalism and professional integrity of researchers. So we addressed different balancing, and in the last sessions, I mean, the research integrity of research ethics of research plays playing a crucial role in dealing with the balance between research autonomy on the one hand and responsibility on the other hand, and therefore in the balancing of values and interests that can be conflicting. So the interests, the rights of participants, passions, society, vulnerable groups on the other hand, research interests, scientific developments, funders, sponsors, careers, and so on. But we should also consider that we try also to understand what is research integrity. We try to also to discuss, to address the interplay between ethics, law, and science, because research integrity is at the intersection between different disciplines, as I said, the science, ethics, and law. And it means that research integrity is characterized by specificity of terms, needs, understanding of a given principles, which might differ from a scientific field to another, but it also means that we need dialogue between these disciplines, especially in an interdisciplinary research project such as ENLIGHTENme. So we also discussed the importance of discussing together to understand the rationale, why some rules are needed, and why these principles are important. These are actually the summary of the main principles of research integrity, which is traditionally intended as a body of principles, legal rules, ethical values, including professional ethics values, professional standards, and so on, and form the basis of the responsible and correct conduct of those who carries out, finance, evaluate scientific research, but also of the institutions. And then we gave some examples of this balance and how to translate the principles of research integrity and the combination of an internal and external dimension. So the internal is the relationships, the ethical and legal principles that concern the relationships between researchers, and external dimension is the protection of participants, protection of society, and so on. So we discussed the different levels of the protection of participants at the international fundamental principles, European principle, the code of conduct, and these principles that you can see here, other specific regulations, but also the principles regulating the relationships among the research community that are mainly linked to the FAIR principles, transparency, honesty, respect, to avoid research misconduct, rules related to publication. And all these principles also linked to the social responsibility of research, the need to maintain scientific integrity, to ensure that the results that are produced are reliable and can be used with trust and confidence, and so on. And so these are the reason why in a project like ENLIGHTENme, it is important to have a data management plan to clarify how data are used, produced, and so on, and also why we need to demonstrate compliance with specific ethics and legal requirements, which are usually, as you know, described in many deliverables, and these are the main aspects. These are 7 reasons to care about integrity in research according to Science Europe. So we also discussed this aspect, and again, since the discussion is important between all the researchers involved, we also said that it is be interesting to try to discuss also these issues, the issues that we addressed in our session also to get all together with the other project members. I don't know if Kira, Andrea are there, if they want to add something. I know that they had problems in joining today.
Hi, it's Kira. I have nothing to add, but happy to take any questions that people may have.
Thank you, Kira.
Thank you very much, Elisabetta, for this very clear and this very clear presentation and summary of the discussion. This is one of the other dimensions of complexity that we are facing in this project. So we have mentioned complexity of light, complexity of defining health, well-being, and you have added one more dimension, which is ethics and responsibility. And we are such sort of struggling because of this dichotomy that we should be able to overcome between freedom of research and responsibility and data protection and privacy. So this is something that we are really facing in the project, but I really think that the problem is that we should start putting together the concept. So when we think about responsibility and ethics and privacy as something separated from research, of course, we then have some problems because we have sort of control over what we are doing. But if we are able to integrate the different perspectives in the research, so really starting from defining the study, so to take into account from the beginning the consequences of what we are doing, I think that we can overcome the difficulties that are there. The problem is that sometimes if we do not do this step of integrating the responsibility within the research, the risk is to have a sort of a bureaucracy or bureaucratic approach that then makes everything difficult. But I think that you highlighted very well how to keep the different perspective together and how to overcome this risk. So thank you very much for this.
Yes, indeed. One of the major challenge of research integrity is how to reach a balance between these. So not to, and we also discussed this aspect not only to limit and to regulate research, but also to enhance the quality, to promote research, to fund research. So I think that we fully agree.
Thank you very much. We have time now for a second round of discussion. I invite the discussant that I've already presented, or also the chairs and discussant that want to add something to intervene. I would start again from Don in case you want to add something or to comment on the results of the other sessions.
Of course, we all have something to say. What do you think? I'll just limit myself to one thing. It seems to be the dominant theme of the discussion, which is complexity. And I'll just kind of I'm not quite sure how to put it. There's always a danger that we recognize complexity and even enjoy it in discussion and then simplify it in order to regulate it, either regulated within research or regulated as a social object. So, I mean, you know, we turn light into a series of standards, which any lighting designer knows don't apply to any real situation. But it's a way of simplifying it so we can manipulate it, you know, within our practices. I've got to say, you know, ethics can be the same thing. We know that our relationship with informants, certainly within, for example, ethnographic traditions, is incredibly complex. And part of doing the research is understanding what ethics apply here, what kind of relationship is being built. So we recognize the complexity, but then, of course, we have to simplify that in order to have certain kinds of rules governing it. And this is just a reflection on what often happens in research. And I think if we are, and you know, particularly in light, light and lighting in relation to urban governance and in relation to populations, their health and their well-being. Part of the problem has been the simplification. So that, for example, as we all know, light becomes just a matter of whether it's bright or dim and whether it helps people feel safe or not. And yet we know that it's so much more complex than that, particularly in relation to, for example, elderly populations. So it's really just my response is a plea to, if we recognize that complexity, let's build it absolutely, unshakably into the way we carry out our research and also the ways in which we talk to each other. That's to say, I have done a lot of reading on chronobiology since we all met in Tartu. Thank you, Dan. And it's been absolutely fascinating. And I want to, these are one of these safe, privileged spaces when we're funded like this to actually engage in that complexity and do something with it, rather than to kind of escape from it back into kind of our own kind of, subdisciplinary simplifications or into regulation or, quite frankly, into ethics done the wrong way. Sorry, that's my rant. That's part of, and I get the feeling from the other discussants. That's why we so enjoyed these conversations yesterday or this morning, because they were brain hurting. Let's keep that.
Thank you, Don. I see Mikkel with
Yes, I hope you don't mind me adding in, Don. I was discussing at the social light session there. And I took myself when you said, do we need to discuss what is good light? And I said, no, because, the complexity of it and so on. But then it made me think, because I got inspired once by something Don had showed, that when we have socially problematic areas in London, you have this spread light of surveillance lighting and so on. And it's super interesting. In Northern Europe, often what we do is to have highly choreographed theatrical light interventions where the very best lighting designers come in with their perception of what is good lighting and security and so on, which means that we actually get very, very choreographed places, the places where there are social problems in a way. So kind of the reverse of the London case. But when I then started thinking, what is good lighting and the complexity of that, it made me realize, based on one of the presentations we had in that session, where they had done a lot to create safety, can we have too good lighting? Can it actually be too good, the kind of lighting that we have, such as with circadian rhythms, having a space that is totally organized for us, depending on hormone production, and everything is just settled for us out of an idea that good lighting is exactly something that helps the body rejuvenate and so on. So while I, on the one hand, agree that we cannot settle what good lighting is, that we still have an industry where different perceptions of what good lighting is actually go hand in hand, and where some perceptions, such as a kind of social one where obviously we need to talk to people, is sometimes seen as an add-on rather than an integral part of going about it. And that leaves the kind of the consequence is that, to start off with, we have lighting design as an add-on to architecture. It's quite often you build the architecture and then the lighting designers comes afterwards. And then we have an add-on there with the social aspects of what is good lighting. So while I agree we cannot settle what good lighting is, I think we need to recognize that there are different kinds of good lighting, and those different kinds of good lighting have different positions in terms of power and influence. And in that way, we may end up with a city totally covered with circadian lighting and everything is just super, super specialized and nice. But then the ethical question is, do we want that? So that would be my comment when I heard some of the other presentations here. Do we actually want too good lighting, or can we have too good lighting?
Thank you for raising this huge discussion about good lighting. my perception is that we cannot choose one because it depends on the objective that we want to reach in one context or the other. So the idea is to find the combination according to the objective that may change in the different parts of the cities, in the city, according to the different target groups, if we are working indoor or outdoor. And probably we could also find a sort of mix that we can apply in different parts of indoor or outdoor cities. But I do not want to be the only one discussing this. Perhaps there are other points of view that we can hear now. Don't know if someone wants to comment on this good light or lights. Don, obviously. I was waiting for you.
If you don't mind, I mean, just very briefly, and again, based on some things that were said in our session, some of that question about good lighting and the way Mikhail was talking about the different power that different visions of good lighting have, say in urban governance. Yeah, I mean, one term that did come up in our session a number of times is simply value. That's to say, there are questions of the kinds of values that stand behind guidelines. Lighting has often, the overriding sense of value has been to do with safety, security, public order. And for some people, that's all light is about. For others, it's about aesthetics and place branding, place marketing, and so on. As Mikhail said, it could be that lighting is entirely governed by issues of health in relation to things like circadian rhythm and kind of, the internal clock of the body, and on and on and on like that. And of course, different parts of the population have different senses of value. One of the crucial bits of a material culture approach to light, which is where, actually both of us come from, is the idea that we use light in relation to what we value in the world. Okay, that's what you light. So if you've got a street where it's all security light, the values are probably about personal security and property. Okay, I think there are these questions of value which are really crucial here in thinking about good light, including the different values which might govern our own research. What we're actually looking for in the work that we do. But then again, all the stakeholders and all the actors we're working with, like city governments, engineering, manufacturers, residents of all sorts, carers, there are different values at stake in thinking about what is good lighting.
Thank you. I agree very much about this concept that you have just said about value. For example, in policies, probably the value that was considered most important for lighting was economies, the cost, or then after that there was the pollution, CO2 emissions. And now we have to try to complement these two seasons of values on lighting with health and well-being. So our purpose should bring...
I have to say, the last comment in the chat on Zoom in our session was also absolutely a value statement, which was about why you do just talk about humans, which we've had, very often as and it does give a different value perspective or a different value framing. And it's one which we increasingly can and should take into account. So, I mean, these are not issues that you resolve. Again, it's about the complexity that you don't want to edit out of your work by simplifying it.
Yeah. And we have to fix one objective and choose the value that derive from the objectives that we want to adopt. So the value that we want to bring to the discussion, and then work towards that. And then we will find the combination of complex solutions that we can keep all together, integrate all together in our policies. Any comment on this from the other sessions, discussant or chairs?
I just wanted to emphasize something that was already said. Since we have all different backgrounds, I think that it's very, very important also to have more interaction between the different work packages, since, you know, there is something that someone from the other work package can add in terms, you know, of multi-layered knowledge. I think this is very important for achieving the goal. It's just a comment, general comment.
Thank you, Chiara. I agree with you. The need to discuss together and not just on specific topics and within the same expertise is really can really help us in solving all the boundaries that seems to be there, but that can be overcome by this fruitful cooperation. I see Elisa now.
Yes, I have a very short comment, and it is a bit related with what Chiara was saying. I think that a key word for that really is hitting my mind is compromise. I think that we have to find a sort of compromise that is not just to simplify, but to we have to be aware, for example, that we cannot gather all the data that we need. The data are not complete. We have to find a compromise for what concerns the good lighting. I think that this word that seems to be not positive could at the end allow us to find the right direction in our research. This is my general comment.
Thank you, Elisa. Mark. Mark, I cannot hear you.
Of course, that needed to happen, didn't it? Yeah, Don, solidarity with you. No, sorry, I just said that I really loved all the previous points, and good lighting is really one of the key issues. And I think, you know, it's just to bounce off and to talk about perhaps what's going to happen in this project, at least for us. When we talked about, you know, the translating research to practice, and in doing that, one of the things we can do is training, or at least peer-to-peer raising awareness on various points. And yeah, in what we will do for this project, we bring together 18 cities for the Health and Urban Lighting Advisory Board of Cities. And so what's really interesting is that in this day, or also yesterday, a lot of points were brought up, and what we want to do is try to translate this for the cities, at least in the first year and a half of the project. So we'll probably bounce off to many of your points and try to work together with the target group of cities directly. So, I mean, if you're interested to also be one of the speakers in one of our next small meetings with cities of the Health and Urban Lighting Advisory Board, I mean, it would be a pleasure to have you and to speak up to the cities. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Any more comment or just some issue you want to leave to the discussion or to the reflection for the next days? I think this, yeah, Don?
Very quickly, sorry, it's just I can't resist. I'm going to go back to this theme of simplification and complexity, which is to say, one reason that there's been, and Mark will know better than anyone in this Zoom, and has done more to work against it than anyone. Part of the problem for lighting is that it has been simplified massively by cities. And part of the job, for example, of Lucy, but social lighting movement, other people who've tried to kind of do more creative things with light, more social responsible things with light. It's really, and that's the translation from research into action, is actually getting cities to recognize the complexity of what they're dealing with and not reduce it to a simple engineering item, which is governed entirely by standards and cost reduction. That's to say that this is an important issue. Just making clear connections with health and well-being has got to expand the kind of political accountability of cities in relation to that kind of infrastructure. But again, part of the translation to city governments and to policy is often about complexity. It's saying, oh, we can't reduce light to this thing which we can just get rid of really quickly and just leave it with the street lighting department. It's actually part of our obligation to citizens and their health and well-being in this case, to treat light with a real responsibility and sense of seriousness. That's exactly what hasn't happened in most applications of lighting in cities. So yeah, it's a really big job, but I want to go back to that theme of complexity. Part of the thing is getting your local mayor or infrastructure budget holder to actually recognize that this is a big issue. And again, Lucy is that's what they do. It's big, it's hard work, but I think that's where our research is located in terms of getting it into the public domain and making it actionable.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks, Don.
Yeah, well, I learned it from you, man. So,
Thank you both. Ais, do you want to add something?
Yes, I wanted to just give my point of view as outsider, because for me light is a new real thing, and I have to be very thankful for all this, because I'm learning a lot. And I mean, the big word is exactly complexity, and it's not only in lighting, it's in urban and all the issues related to urban management as socio-ecological system. So for me, it's fascinating to see that lighting is very complex also. And at least I have the feeling that we have at this point more questions than answers, but I think that is research what is for. So we are in a good point. And more for maybe my part of my what we are working in the project, this fear of simplification is the same that we have, because modeling complex system, I mean, you can have this, I mean, they say, all the models are grown, only some of them are useful, and they are useful, the one that you can really simplify to work with, but how much you can simplify it? I mean, that is a big issue. And also, I think you were saying before, Don, everybody loves an easy answer to a complex question, but we cannot set up an ad. I mean, we have to, I think our objective has to be to go a little more and work in this complexity and see how we can do operative complex research. I think we have a big way to go, Simona and Elisa and Julia, you as coordinators. I think also I agree that it's something that we have to make good together, and we have to put the discussion and the inputs from the different fields that we are working. And so that is something that we have to figure out how to do it in the next year. So, but I really enjoy a lot this conference. Thank you for organizing.
Thank you very much, Ais. Any other comment? If not, I think even if we are a bit in advance, it was really fruitful discussion and very fruitful 2 days of conference, and it's also Friday afternoon, so it's good if we also end some minutes before what we had initially foreseen. I would like to thank you very, very much, because I think that even if the complexity is not is still there, I think that we are making steps advances in our goals. So we are learning to work together, to exchange the different expertise and points of view. And we are building every day one more progress towards our aim of really building policies towards health and well-being of older adults. This is at the end what we would like to reach in our project. So studying and understanding how to deal with lighting, public lighting, urban lighting, indoor lighting together. So to build this new framework for improving the quality of life of people. This is what we want to do at the end. So we should, this is our value, if we want to mention the wording that Don was using before. But I think that it is not easy, but we are making progresses. I see that we are building our knowledge, and we are also understanding better how to work in this direction. So I think this conference was very, very useful towards our aims. So thank you very much for the discussion, for the selection of the papers, for participating, for the ones that are not members of the consortium and that are still here listening to the discussion. And I think we have a lot to do, but we started with the right approach. So I'm really happy of this, and I think that we can reach some good result at the end of the project. Thank you very much again. Enjoy the weekend. Happy holidays also, because we are almost there. So try to have a bit of rest. Hopefully the situation will not become worse. So we will have also the possibility to see someone and to be with our families. So my best wishes to you and your families, and see you soon in presence next time, I hope. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you, Simona. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.